Hello, everyone, and welcome to this panel. I have some of the kind of brightest minds that I could gather to answer some questions today. A lot of these questions have come from webinars and other events that we've done here at BrowserStack. And so before we get diving into the questions, I'm going to do a quick round of introductions so that you know who everyone is. And so when I say your name, could you just say hello so that people can make sure that they know who you are? And then we are going to dive into the questions because I'm hoping I've got a few questions to get started. If people start asking them in the stage chat, I will see if there are questions that are relevant to the question I'm asking at that time, and I'll bring them up. And we'll just see how this goes. We're going to try to make this as fluid and as energetic as we can, and I'm looking forward to it. So today we have Jim Evans, who is a member of the, sorry, I've got to get this right, is a principal member of technical staff at Salesforce. He is also a core contributor to the Selenium project and has been there for well over a decade, so kind of understands browser automation. So welcome, Jim.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you.
Then we have Trisha Chetani, who is a QA engineer from Adidas and is kind of an up-and-coming bright mind. So, Trisha, could you say hello?
Hi, everyone.
We have Manoj Kumar, who is a principal consultant for ThoughtWorks. He's a Selenium contributor as well, and has done numerous talks around Selenium all over the world. So, Manoj, can you say hello?
Hi, everyone. Good to be here.
Cool. And finally, we have Pooja Shah, who's a lead platform automation engineer and has been a speaker at numerous Selenium events and kind of automation events, and is a great person to have. So, hi, Pooja.
Hi, everyone.
Cool. So, I've got a few questions, and I think kind of the first one, I'm going to throw this out because I find this question to be slightly controversial, and I think it's always good to start with a controversial question. What in a previous webinar, someone asked, like, why is JavaScript always more powerful than Java when interacting with UI elements? So this is around Selenium. Like, what? Clearly, they think JavaScript is more powerful than Java. Do people have opinions?
I do.
Jim, go for it.
I don't grant the premise of the question. First of all, the question seems to imply that JavaScript is somehow more powerful than other languages in the UI automation space, and I don't think that's necessarily true. Now, while JavaScript is kind of the lingua franca of web development, so every website uses JavaScript as its primary development language, at least in the browser at runtime. That does not necessarily mean that the browser automation tools that utilize JavaScript may or may not be the more powerful. Certainly, if you can drop into JavaScript to do UI automation tasks within the browser itself, you pretty much have full range of access to everything that the developer has and that the page itself has. So in that sense, yes, it's more powerful. But as an automation language or as a tool, I don't necessarily agree that JavaScript is more powerful than Java. Now, if we're talking about JavaScript automation frameworks, like some of the newer tools that have come out, like Playwright or Puppeteer, things like that, I do have opinions about those frameworks and the way that they are currently architected, but they're somewhat orthogonal to this particular question.
And we'll get to kind of that controversy later in this panel.
Excellent.
Awesome. Pooja, Trisha, do you have any opinions on this one?
to build up with what Zim have shared, like in my previous experiences, I've seen developer were asking me or requesting me to actually develop the framework which was built on JavaScript or use the tools which were built on JavaScript because it was easier for them to contribute in the test automation framework, or else it would be hard for them to learn a new language and then develop or contribute with me on the test automation framework when I was on leave.
Yeah. Cool. Pooja, do you have anything to add, or shall I go on to the next question?
Yeah, so rightly, like Jim and Trisha said, this could be powerful in a way you think that you really want to do something really, really fast automation, probably, or maybe be able to do everything. For example, it might make sense to do automation in JavaScript when your application is more Angular style or anything towards very native to JavaScript, maybe React app or something. It might make sense there because they are more closely towards how the components are rendered. But in general sense, for almost all applications, I personally feel that having a flexibility which Java or Python or any other structural languages would provide, that might not be the case with JavaScript. And that ease and that abstraction level would be achievable, but would be a tougher thing because you need to get started to learn JavaScript in vast way to build that kind of abstraction and make it available as an interface to be utilizing multiple framework components or across team thing. So it's a powerful in technical terms, but it's, to my personal opinion, it's not as powerful as it can take you longer in making the framework more usable across and more scalable across.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think kind of there are interesting problems to be solved in every language, right? So, awesome. So my next question is around kind of how people structure tests, really. Do you have separate API tests? Do you go for as many Selenium tests as possible? Kind of like, and how far do you kind of go with like making sure this is fully integrated into your CI system? So it's a general question around code organization mostly.
Sure, can go.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. I think the idea of test pyramid really comes into picture. I think straight away an option to look at it. I think if you look at the test pyramid, starts from the bottom. I think the QAs as a quality analyst, I think the primary role is to ensure the overall quality of the product. It doesn't mean that you will just automate your end-to-end UI or API tests. I think it's overall quality is something that we should be looking for. I mean, that said, you should also extend your hand to help devs, or even have some sort of code pairing with them. So I think unit test is mainly there to look at the granular pieces, chunks of little functions out there. And then you of course have the API tests. And if you're someone following microservices, then of course you have the integration tests coming in between. You can write some contracts-based tests using Pact or some other tools out there. And then you come up to all the way up the end-to-end UI automation, and followed by the exploratory testing, right? I mean, that's generally how I see the pattern really works. And there are, contradicting to this, there are other patterns available, like, the champion testing trophy and stuff like that. I mean, I think it really works for, if it works for your project, I think we'll go ahead and use it. So that's how I see it, segregating tests, look at it. I think most of it, I think more projects nowadays, I think moving from monolith to modernization, platform, where we look at using microservices as a platform, right? So I think most of the tests, if you're able to write, enough number of tests for your provider and consumers in your different microservices, I think the remaining the end-to-end coverage, right? So I think the happy path flow is where we're looking at. I think more than happy path, if you're able to know which parts of your application that majority of your users are coming in, I think if those are, I think tackling those areas in UI automation, using tools like Selenium to mimic the exact user behavior would give you the perfect, the blend of testing that you would look at end-to-end.
Yeah. I think that was a fairly in-depth answer. So I'm going to kind of move on to the next question, because that was a really good answer, Manoj. And I want to try to get as many questions in as possible. And so kind of leading from that, I should say, when you're creating your tests, like how do you kind of ensure that there is no flakiness? And do you kind of find certain frameworks are better than others? Or is it kind of down to the engineer, really?
So I'll try to take this. So there is one. So we like anytime we think about application like automation success, basically, the very first point is this, that my tests are flaky, and that's where I got to basically hear from Alan Richardson that he puts it very aptly that it's not actually the tests which are flaky. It's actually the application flow which is flaky. Because in tests we are doing what the flow is supposed to be as an end user. So to say that if there is some tool which can actually be better in handling the flakiness, I don't think so. It's not because of the test, it's because of the application. So the way I would approach is basically to break down this problem and debug and find out what are the causes for it. So it could be causes like it would be as simple as, let's say I have written login page automation and I say, put my credentials and click the submit button. It might be possible that the events on the credential passing and the submit button, they need a fraction of nanoseconds to basically go ahead. But in my automation, I did not took care of that synchronization, and I just went fast because Selenium, from Selenium or JavaScript, it just went into passing the keys fast, and it just happened. So while testing locally, it worked, but it might not work sometime later because the latency might be different. So as simple nuances like this, as a user, if I start thinking about how much time a user will take, an average user will take to fill this form, if I can adhere to that, not saying that too slow tests, but at least being reasonable about the synchronization can help a lot. And then there are various reasons like, are we writing like very long running tests, or are we actually running this test in parallel, and is our code is not thread safe? So
yeah.
So very simple example I think everyone would relate to is when we start writing tests and we create the browser instance, and we start with Java especially, we start loving this static keyword a lot, and every instance we start with static, and right then when we parallelize them and we hit the dead end, and a lot of rework is required to remove that static to make it thread safe, because all the browsers will get confused about each other. So this also leads to flakiness. We might get wrong results, and we have to decouple the reasons for flakiness and then take a stab on each one of them. Like, how can we improve?
Yeah.
Is it about the R test which is doing something which we did not know, or the test data or test environment is not ready, or it could be dependencies also. Preconditions like my test requires something and I run it in local as a single unit, but when I run all of them in cloud, and they require certain dependency which is not there now. So yeah, it can be a range of reasons. I think I can go on the whole night. But but yeah, here is the gist that we need to break it down and find what is the actual root cause and take on it. Yeah.
And I think that's normally quite good. And kind of from there, and so I'm going to direct this one at Trisha, is that like when my next question is like when you've kind of been working through this and suddenly you've got your tight deadlines, you've got a bunch of flakiness, you've got a bunch of accessibility stuff that needs to be tested, security stuff tested, kind of when you've got a tight deadline, like what is the thing that you tend to throw out first? Like, you know, is it going to be accessibility? Is it going to be security? Is it going to be the flakiness? Like where do you normally approach that problem from?
So when I get bunch of things, first I'll try to determine what is the priority of the test. Like what are the tests needed to be done. I'll sync up quickly with the product owners or product manager, try to understand with them what they need for this release and what is the specifically they are looking for user for. Or I'll try to understand what is the traffic, which feature are very important from the traffic by going through the analysis of traffic reports, like which browsers, which particular features. And then we will try to prioritize those tests and start from there. And I think once we go from there, and then like if we are still not on that timeline, I'll try to introduce bug bash kind of thing in my team, so that everybody in the team, like irrespective of tester who is only doing test, product owner, or from developer perspective, or from UX people perspective, or DevOps perspective, everybody will come into the meeting and they will try to do the bug bash and they will try to find the bugs, and we try to help the team to improve the quality for that release.
Yeah, no, it's always a fine balance, isn't it? Trying to kind of do it, and QA are normally the ones at the end of the stick that and get beaten the hardest. So.
I'll just add one point here. So
yeah,
we may not be in the tight deadline, like we may not be focusing to specifically do this in this end of sprint. While doing the functional testing itself, like we started at least installing the plugins like Wave or X. They will, while doing the testing the same time, we get to know few aspects of the accessibility and we can get them corrected way before, which does not require extra time. So I would probably try that approach.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good kind of approach to that as well, kind of extending it. So, and so kind of, I'm really liking this theme, so I'm going to carry on with it slightly, and looking at some of the questions that have been coming in on the side is that like some people are saying that a lot of their flakiness has disappeared, and so this kind of rolls back to the first question around JavaScript versus Java, and then other frameworks. Is that people going they've moved to other frameworks like Puppeteer, Playwright, Cypress. It's disappeared, like their flakiness has disappeared. But then, you know, sometimes they do get like their tests are flaky, but as to kind of Pooja's answer is that sometimes the app is not flaky when the user uses it. It works as it is, but the assumptions around the test are wrong. So Jim, kind of like, I know you have opinions around kind of things like this, and it's always good for a panel to be controversial where possible. Could you give us your opinion in this area?
Well, okay, so you know there seem to be a fair number of Selenium's been around for a while now, and it's a UI automation library that is used by thousands and thousands of people all worldwide. But over the last couple of years or so, there have been some new frameworks that have cropped up, and they seem to be getting a lot of traction. A lot of them are, most of them are JavaScript based, but that really doesn't matter from the standpoint of when I think about it. Because that just happens to be the programming language that's used to access the library. My challenge with some of these alternative frameworks is that they tend to rely on browser internals or internal, non-public or techniques that are unique to to one particular browser family, and that to me seems counterproductive, given that there is a browser group standard. The World Wide Web Consortium has created a specification for how that is supported and maintained by browser vendors, and their implementations are supported by browser vendors for automating the browser through the user interface, through the UI itself. That's WebDriver, of course, is what I'm talking about. I'm kind of dancing around it. None of the newer frameworks that I'm aware of, from be that Puppeteer or Playwright or Cypress or any of that generation of automation utilities, they don't use the WebDriver protocol. They don't use WebDriver. In fact, in some cases, they're actively hostile to using WebDriver, which to me is tantamount to being hostile to actual browser standards, because it's an actual browser standard. WebDriver is. If you're not going to use it, you're using something that's not a standard. You're hostile to it. So, I don't have a problem with non-Selenium projects using WebDriver to do their automation. I think that's fantastic if they do. But for those that don't, I really kind of have to question how committed they are to working with the broader web community, because to my knowledge, and maybe I missed something, but to my knowledge, none of the competing frameworks to Selenium came to the Selenium project and says, we think your approach is wrong for X, Y, and Z reasons, and we would like to see if we can collaborate on a way to do something different, something in a different way. Likewise, I don't know of any of those projects that came to the World Wide Web Consortium working group, the Browser Testing and Tools working group that's responsible for the WebDriver specification, which is open to anyone to comment on. It's not a closed group. Everything happens in the open. None of them came to any of the working group meetings or communicated with the working group in any way to say, we think the spec is doing things in a bad way. We should change it to do it in another way. None of them did that. If they had, and either of those two groups had said, no, we think we're still right, then, bless you. Go ahead and do what you want to do. Do it your own way. But it seems to me that it's antithetical to any sort of building of community if you're not willing to work with the community to improve things, and that to me is just very sad.
Well, so to defend one group of the names that I gave, right? There was a changing of the guard at Puppeteer, and with the changing of the guard at Puppeteer, they've actually come to the worldwide W3C, and so kind of I know this is because I chair that working group. Mm-hmm. And they've actually been incredibly collaborative, and this is where we're getting things like the WebDriver BiDi specification. I can't say the same for the others. I know the other two are openly hostile towards Selenium whenever we've tried to at least collaborate with them, because I'm a big fan of collaboration. I think a rising tide lifts all ships, right? And that has always been my philosophy in open source, and why I love open source as it is. So yeah, no.
Well, the WebDriver BiDi was kind of my where I was leading to in terms of one of the things that some of those alternative frameworks do is they do have some event-driven features, which, if used correctly, can somewhat reduce flakiness. Or a flappiness of tests if used correctly, and up until the WebDriver BiDi protocol is an attempt to, in a cross-browser and open and collaborative way, define a protocol that does respond in an event-driven way, and will let users enable that to help to reduce that flakiness.
And just as an aside on this one, the reason why it's taking a little bit longer to kind of do and get out there is it's not because it's W3C and therefore people assume it's slow, is that some of the problems that we're trying to solve is scalability. Selenium is incredibly scalable, which is why BrowserStack helps a lot of companies scale. But when you have an invented system, scaling becomes quite hard because you can potentially DDoS your test servers and your test running machines. So this is why it's taking a little bit longer to solve some of these harder problems. But I regularly post the minutes for each meeting. So if you're ever interested, you can always find me on Twitter and I can kind of share that out. But thank you for that, Jim. Right. Oh, I've kind of lost my place. Right. There we are. And so there's been some some good questions, and I'm just going to catch them because I've lost them. The auto scrolling, and I do apologize. Right. So this is a good one, I think, for anyone who wants to pick it up. So kind of going back to a bit of flakiness, bit of system problems. Like, how do you in your CIs generally handle like the platform returning errors? So in this case, like Selenium server failed to start up, Appium server failed to start up. Do you like automatically retry those, or is it just like and then error and hope a human will sort it out? Anyone can have that one. Okay,
I'll take a first stab, and I think others can add on. I think the flickiness has been there, a part of a question since we started, isn't it? Such an interesting topic. I think to me, flickiness is always be there, no matter whatever you do. I think we'll have to just live with it because we are handling, applications that are at the presentation layer, right? Where you have things neatly painted on the UI, and you try to fiddle with some of the browser automation frameworks like Selenium. So I think to answer the question straight on, I think retry will never be a solution to reduce flakiness because it will still be there. Instead, I would recommend looking at doing a deep dive analysis or sort of do a root cause analysis on why is it failing. It could be a number of reasons. I think it all boils down to finding the pattern of the failure, right? Sometimes it could be, like the browser not reachable exception, or it could be, Appium server is not up, or it could be, network failure, or, it could be ranging from locator problems to a lot of things, right? If we see, I think you can split down into two sections. So one is application specific, which could be locator problem. When I mean application specific, it could be the script that you write to automate a scenario, or it could be the application under test that you interact with. So on that, you have a number of things, and also on the framework and the runner side, you have a number of things like, the Selenium errors and all that. But I think the key real goal is to do and find the pattern. I think the retries or even, self-healing sort of tests, or in my opinion, are not the best way to solve the problems. Because what if one time it failed because there was a bad performance, and that's something the user would face end of the day, right? That's something that we should look for as well. So I think there's no real solution to it, if you ask me. I don't have a silver bullet answer, even though I've been doing automation for quite some time. So in my experience, I always do root cause analysis and find the pattern and then try and fix. That has always been the case. And I was never worried about or even concerned about why my build is always red. It's fine if your build is red. You don't want to necessarily look at having 100% pass each rate. If it's failing, I'm happy because my scripts are working. So that's the way that I see it.
Okay. Yeah. And just to kind of give you back some of what people are saying, people really liked your answer, Manoj. So yeah, I agree. I come from a world where you can never have 100% pass rate. And to be honest, the delta of how a test is failing should, like, if you know what it's going to be and it's flaky at that point, like, you can just live with it. And then when the delta changes, then you start to get worried. especially when you start talking millions or hundreds of thousands of tests. So kind of that's where I'm coming from, having worked in Mozilla. It's just like it's a problem you cannot solve.
Absolutely. I mean, you take this as an opportunity to improve your test. I mean, that's how I see it, an opportunity, because for the very first time, if you write a test and if it passes, I actually doubt myself whether I've written it right or not. I mean, that's the way to look at it. And I mean, it doesn't matter whether you run it in local or somewhere in the cloud. It could be a number of reasons, because the number of layers that it takes. I think David has a wonderful blog series on how Selenium works. It has a neat, distinction about just using, is element displayed on your code, and what all things that happens behind the scenes. I think if you take a read at it, I think I'll also know and better write tests based on it.
Yeah. I'm also of the opinion I don't trust the test until I've seen it failed, which is why I'm a big believer in test-driven development, right? Is that like I see my test has failed, now I'm going to make it pass, so I know I can trust it. But if I write my code and then go write the test and like, oh yeah, it passes, like this, who knows if it's actually doing the right thing, right? Yeah. Cool. And so this one, I quite like this question because it deals with people kind of a different set of problems. And since we've all kind of worked for multinationals, it's very important. When you're writing your tests and you have a multilingual code base, or not like as in language, like spoken language, how do you make sure that you can kind of write a test once and it does the same thing over and over, like in the different languages? Like, how do you approach that? Does that question make sense? Do I need to rephrase it?
So in my experience, I've done this kind of testing work, checking the different language. And what I did is like I've taken the locators for the specific, like let's say submit button as in different language. I've taken the 3 different language and I was changing the browser. Like I'm changing the language in the browser. Like let's say usually we will have US equal to E in English. And if it is Chinese, then we will have US equal to Chinese. Then we'll set the cookies and we will run with the different names of the button and see like it's working or not, whether I'm able to click after, like I'm able to find the text and click it. So basically I've done it while setting a cookie and finding the exact locator with that.
Yeah. Pooja, I know you're trying to talk, but you are muted, so.
Okay. So the way I would try to do, because this is about like, the question is about more of like multiple languages running tests, needing to run them like multiple times, like 30 times or so. Yeah. It might become time cumbersome. So maybe I would try to add to what Trisha said, that maybe we will pick few languages which are more important for us, where we want to run them all the times. But for all other languages or the test suite, I would go more of a component level testing than actually doing the full-fledged UI automation per se. Just like a developer would have created the local configurations to be able to load on the browser automatically. Same way, if I can write a component or level testing, functional testing in the backend to verify if the local conversion is correctly working fine, then I can save this. Like this can run in like minutes to identify if all local transformations will work fine on when loaded, and to certify that yes, it will be loading fine, I can maybe run one kind of smoke test on top few languages which are important to do on UI layer.
And so yeah, like I like that's an approach that I've done in the past as well. But the question then leads me, and this is I'm talking from experience because this is bugs I've tended to look for, is like do you add visual testing to this when you're doing it? Because German, for example, has wonderfully long phrases, and suddenly they overflow text boxes. Like, so do you employ visual testing with your language support normally?
Ideally, we should. Ideally, we should, because it's also as about visual. It is also about more of a cultural tone setting. Also, um, uh, it- same word, same sentence might render in a wrong tone, and it could be like a chaotic situation. So
Yeah.
ideally, we should, but we need to define subset, like what should go in component. Is it my mic doing this?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So yeah, so I would still, something is wrong.
Okay.
I'll be back.
Yeah,
Yes, it's fine.
We'll come back to Pooja in a minute.
Sure. I mean, Jim, do you want to add something before I had my 2 cents?
No, go right ahead, Manoj. You guys are talking about the same kinds of things that about how I would approach exactly the same problem and how I have approached the same problem. I do know that we do have that we do incorporate some visual tests in our arsenal. So yes, I mean that you guys are saying exactly the right things. You're killing it.
Cool. I think I was trying to add, definitely visual testing is something we could look for. I think the only common thing that to look at is I don't understand any language apart from my mother tongue and English, unfortunately, or a little bit of other languages that I try to learn. But there's certainly a language barrier is there. I think at that stages, visual testing is there to rescue, which will help you understand. You have set up a baseline and then you compare against it. And then you get a results out of it. So certainly that is an area. But I think from an automation perspective, so that is one sort of validation. From a validation standpoint, that is one of the key things to look for. From an script development and an execution standpoint, I think there's literally, at least 90-80%, nothing would change on your DOM, because pretty much it's going to be the same HTML div and span tags available. I think definitely the IDs may change because someone wants to give. I think that are the only areas to look for. But I think otherwise, pretty much the same strategy would work.
Cool. So I know we've got not much time left, and I'm going to ask one question, and then if I have chance, I will squeeze in a quick last one. But I saw this one come up, and I really liked it. If you had one tip to speed up your tests, or your test cycle. So it could be managed, like it could be a people tip, or it could be a tech tip. What would that one tip be? And I'd like an answer from all of you on this one.
I would go for this. I really like the Rob Mini 10 piece
Trisha,
of
you're on mute.
Oh, no, I can hear Trisha. You go for it, Trisha. I could hear you.
Okay,
Sorry.
so I really like the 10p of testability by Rob Many, and that is really good. Like, we need to improve our testability to get away from flakiness and all sort of things. And once we remove the flakiness, our test will become better, and we will actually have the faster results.
Cool. Jim?
Talk to your developers. As a tester, talk to your dev team. Don't be isolated in a silo. Don't expect or accept the application being thrown over the wall to you as a tester. Get involved with your development team. Sit down with them and actually talk with the people on your development team. If they are not able or willing to talk with you, then that is a problem you need to escalate to management all the way up to the C-level, the C-suite level, if you need to, because that is a huge productivity booster for automated testing. Is to work with the development team.
Yeah.
Yep. Pooja?
Mine is as well communication. Just to add what Jim said directly right now, go to basically find out all the places where a developer would be debugging that. Take that log access right now if you haven't taken yet. That was the first step towards it. start talking about UI when UI changes happens, like you should be involved, and you can collaboratively define that the locator should not change much. They should pertain. They should have those IDs which they were having earlier, selectors basically. So communication is the key with the devs, with all the stakeholders, with your own team, and my personal tip would be like, take all the excesses and yeah, obviously use responsibly, but try to understand how would we debug if something goes wrong, and then come up with a strategy. How can we actually make it robust? So communication is the key. No silos.
Perfect. Manoj.
Do I really have anything to add?
I'm sure you must have something.
Well, I guess all the best answers are already out there. I think pretty much. I think nothing specific I have. I think just go on. I think the team collaboration really matters. Talk to them. I think take everything as an opportunity. That's how I see it. I would suggest the same. That's how you could actually get down to the real problem rather than reacting to it. I think be always proactive. Be it script development or collaboration or whatever it is. So I think that should automatically pave the way.
Yeah, for me, I think I really love all your answers. Like, I think the one thing for me is make sure everyone is empowered, right? It's not just about communication, it's about empowerment, right? Like, so if like you as a tester wants to go change something that would make your life easier, you should be empowered to go do that, right? Like, oh, I need to make this change to make this bit of code more testable because I'm kind of tweaking a few things here and there. Just be empowered. Like, make your, like, that should be one of your power things, right? Like, just be empowered to go grow, like, and to move everything. And I think kind of for me, that's what a lot of the shift left discussion is all about, is just actually giving people empowerment and kind of more scope to kind of, as you've all very beautifully said, like, it's about removing silos where possible, right? If you're throwing something over a fence, it's going to be rubbish, right? Like, high performing teams do not throw things over the fence. They collaborate, they empower, they move on, right?
Yeah. So with empowerment, I just recall one example. So I had been, I think, lucky in that sense that we had one bug which is like flaky. We cannot reproduce. Okay. So now there was no way identified like to even reproduce and fix it like 2 weeks. And the way I understood is like, only if we have a validation for customer to not go into that flow, then we will not even have this bug. From whatever reason it is coming, if we do not let this flow happen, the bug will stop coming. And all it required was me basically to convince my devs to add validation, and devs are working on something else. So I needed that empowerment and that confidence that, okay, let me go and add that validation in the production code, push it, and that bug disappeared forever. And I saved my time testing all those validation which was supposed to happen on combinations which was supposed to happen on UI. I would, if I write a test to test all those combinations, are they failing? Are they giving this right response? That would take me more time than actually adding the validations in production code directly. So yeah, that's a very important thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. With that, we are at time. I know I've really enjoyed this whole session. I think we've had some really good questions, some really good answers. A huge thank you to all the people up on the panel. Thank you, all of you. And a huge thank you to everyone who's been watching, asking questions. I am terribly sorry that I could not get to all of your questions. I was trying to kind of make sure that it all fit in, and where I could, I kind of pulled in a couple of the questions. But yes, thank you all. And so to everyone who's watching, please give the panel a huge cheer and a thank you. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks everyone.